Mr. Akinfela Akoni, President of the Oxford-Cambridge Club of Nigeria, members of this distinguished club, leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for inviting me to join you tonight. This is my first time visiting Lagos, and I'm pleased it is to be part of this distinguished gathering to share thoughts on how Africa can be more relevant in today's world. Let me make 2 points at the very outset. First, Africa today has the opportunity to play its rightful role in the global arena. But to do so requires the continent to speak with one voice and to be competitive in all aspects, which in turn demands radical social, economic transformation. Second, as the subject of our discussion this evening suggests, Africa will do this when its people lead dignified lives and take full charge of their development agenda. For this to happen, African countries need a new kind of leadership, one that has a vision for the country and the continent as a whole, a passion and commitment for its rapid development, as well as the well-being of its people. The transformational leadership that will lead to Africa's prosperity and ensure its relevance must be one that is confident, assertive, and innovative, and committed to promoting and defending the continent's interests. Above all, it should be prepared to seek solutions from within the philosophies and practices of our societies to various challenges that we face, and develop ideas to propel our countries forward. Sometimes this might require going beyond the conventional and embracing the unorthodox. It should be clear, however, that no individual leader or country acting alone will achieve a continent-wide qualitative change and play a significant global role. That can only come about if our leadership seek and promote cooperation across Africa on a wide range of issues. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the fact that we are speaking about the need for change and the sort of agents who can bring it about is admission that Africa has not lived up to expectations and its full potential. The question then is, what do we need to do to reverse this situation? In the words of an eminent Nigerian, we must first find out when the rain started beating us. Africa is not where it should be, not because of a lack of resources or human capital. Indeed, if anyone had any doubts about the intellectual and entrepreneurial potential of the continent, they need only to look at those present in this room. As for enterprise, there are fewer greater than Nigerians. The issue has been that we still do not have enough leaders across a variety of fields with ideas and practices to change our societies, the capacity to mobilize our people, and the vision, and the drive to spur innovation and competitiveness. Of course, Africa has had leaders, some of them great leaders, over the last 50 years of independence. But despite the liberation and post-independence ideals, visions were only partially realized, and Africa lost decades in terms of much-needed cohesion and development. To be fair, Africa's shortcomings cannot be entirely attributed to its leaders. Other factors, including external ones, such as inherited colonial structures that were not always relevant, and external control of the development process, contributed to the situation. In the last 2 decades, Africa has begun to move again and entered a new phase. We are no longer looking to the outside for solutions to internal issues because homegrown ideas provide the best answers, not only for development, but also for the restoration of our dignity. That means change because the status quo has proved unsatisfactory. Now, change of any sort is a journey into the unknown, and unacceptable conditions alone do not provide enough drive to venture there. And yet, anyone driving change should bring along all the people with them, using practices and beliefs that people identify with, that can help remove the fear, and make them embrace change, own and even build on it. The collected, accumulated wisdom resulting from both the value system and participation has the effect of making people shareholders in the enterprise that is their country. As you all know, shareholders want and expect good dividends. This is the source of homegrown ideas. They emanate from what the people collectively know and practice, and their power to drive change comes from this fact. Of course, those who have always treated us as followers rather than leaders in our own right will want to halt the development of such a homegrown ideas. Some will do so out of sheer ignorance. More often than not, however, they will disrupt us with subversive intent. But this should not deter us because, as we all know, success built on internally generated ideas breeds confidence and fosters dignity. Let me illustrate with a practical experience of Rwanda. In Rwanda, we have consciously drawn from our history and culture ideas to drive our social, political, and economic development for the simple reasons that they work. In the aftermath of the genocide in 1994, Rwanda was faced with a huge problem. Considering the large number of perpetrators, the need to give victims justice as well as restore social harmony, conventional political and justice systems were totally inadequate for the task. So we opted for Gacaca, a traditional conflict resolution mechanism, which in a decade tried close to 2 million cases at a small fraction of the US $2 billion it cost the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda to try only 60 cases. But the significance of Gacaca goes beyond numbers of cases and their cost. It also addressed the key issues of justice and reconciliation. And because it was the first homegrown solution successfully applied to a seemingly intractable problem, it inspired and empowered Rwandans to seek and use similar initiatives for broader national development. Its success catalyzed the generation of ideas and values crucial to national development: resilience, self-reliance, confidence, and social cohesion. Most importantly, it restored Rwandans' dignity and pride in our culture, values as a source of remedies to current challenges, innovation, and approaches to development. Similarly, the government of Rwanda initiated the Girinka, one cow per poor family or household program, adapted from the traditional Rwandan solidarity practices of giving each other a cow as a part of friendship and support in the event of misfortune or dire need. Its modern application, Girinka addresses several issues at once: improved nutrition, income generation, and increased agricultural productivity. Similarly, the government advanced fertilizers to crop farmers to boost production with significant success. This initiative, together with other poverty reduction measures, has contributed to the reduction of poverty by 12% between 2005 and 2010, and raised 1 million people out of poverty. Distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, what works internally may have application to intra-African situations, particularly as we focus on greater cooperation and integration, trade and investment, in order to keep up with the emerging and the traditional strong economies. This is what will guarantee the individual and collective strength of our countries and contribute to our relevance. To take one example from East Africa, as a result of the economic integration of the 5 member states of the East African Community, the region's total trade with the rest of the world more than doubled between 2005 and 2010, rising from $17.5 billion to $37 billion. Foreign direct investment also rose from $683 million in 2005 to $1.7 billion in 2011. This approach of greater cooperation also intends or extends to peace and stability. And that is why today African leaders are investing in continent-generated solutions to issues of political stability and conflict resolution. The results so far are encouraging. Somalia is re-emerging as a viable country. Sudan and South Sudan are on the road to peaceful coexistence. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, regional efforts hold the greatest promise of an enduring resolution to the conflict there. In conclusion, I submit to you that Africa's position and relevance in the world in an increasingly competitive global environment will be ensured by a leadership and people that refuse to be second best and that stand up for their shared interests. This requires a mindset focused on dignity and merit, individually and collectively. And by drawing from our culture and history as inspiration and source of solutions to our development needs. And for Africa to have a bigger voice in world affairs, it is imperative that the momentum the continent has gained is maintained and even fast-tracked. That duty falls on all of us, on those in charge of our countries at different levels today, but more so to those who will pick up the baton from them. And I know many fall in that category in this room tonight. In any case, there is no other option I thank you for your kind attention.
His Excellency, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Mr. Paul Kagame.
Please put your hands together once again for His Excellency, the President of Rwanda. Mr. President, I was told by the Executive Committee of the club that certainly there will be many questions that will be raised after your speech. And it is true that in your speech you've given us a lot of food for thought. But I must confess that at the back where I was sitting, quite a few people also have thought for food. And so we're going to have about 6 questions. I already have about 3 that have been given to us by members of the club before now. And then we're going to take about 3 or 4 more at His Excellency's convenience. And then after that, we shall begin dinner. The first question, ladies and gentlemen, is about leadership, obviously. And it's from a guest, Mr. Tunde Ahonsi. And he says in his question that we know that leadership is critical to national development, but often neglected in the analysis of leadership are the twin issues of succession, planning, and leadership development. The legacy of a very successful leader is highly dependent on him or her being succeeded by an equally visionary, committed, and patriotic leader. A bad or inferior successor can very quickly destroy the achievements of the predecessor. Sir, what are your thoughts on this nexus vis-a-vis a post-Kagame Rwanda?
First of all, in leadership, or good leadership for that matter, and political leadership that is required for healthy development of any nation, there are a number of things leaders are certain about and can ensure, and in fact fall in their primary responsibility. But there are others one may not be too sure about, that depend on other factors beyond maybe human control. So in my understanding, in our situation, what we have tried to do is, one, to make sure that as we go about our responsibilities, we build institutions, stable, strong institutions that will serve our country long term. And also within that, and of course when you talk about institutions, we are talking about people who work in those institutions as well. Institutions are not things that are independent of people, but people work and use the institutions to do what they need to do. And also allow development of capacities for those institutions as well as human capacities, meaning the people who work in the institution. This is the best thing we can do. This is what we always try to do, and we invest a lot in this area. Of course, the issue, as you mentioned, therefore follows that of succession. How do leaders come, serve, go, others come following them? This is normally to be ensured by these institutions I was talking about, because institutions live longer than individuals. That's why it is important for us to invest in institutions. Now, what I said is not necessarily predictable or is probably outside human capacity, is to say that, well, leaders have come, maybe they have served well, they have gone, and others keep following in their footsteps. none of us in this room or outside can say for sure the leaders who were here yesterday maybe did their job well, that those who follow or individuals that follow will necessarily do as well. They could do even better, but they could also be worse. I cannot say those who will follow me once I have served my time and left, that they will necessarily, I cannot predict that this is how they are going to be, because they will perform depending on who they are and how they can exercise their responsibilities in this leadership. Leaders may come and do better, others may come and do worse. But one important thing that I was saying we need to ensure that happens, that is creating institutions. Institutions have to be there. It's a necessity, so that we prepare that people will come and go, whether some will come and do better than others or worse than others. It is indispensable that we have these institutions in place, and that's what we have tried to ensure, as well as invest in our people, so that hopefully they can serve very well within these institutions and carry out their responsibilities to the expectations of our citizens. That's what we do, and that's the answer to the problem.
Mr. President, sir, you talked about and you emphasized the fact that these ideas should be homegrown. They should be Afrocentric. Many of the institutions that you are now talking about in Africa and the structures, political structures, were imported. What are your thoughts on the type of African political structures, African constitutionalism, that will ensure that the quality of leadership does not play the most critical role, but just a partial role in ensuring continued development?
Right. You see, I emphasize homegrown solutions, but this does not preclude learning from others or trying to apply best practices. You can learn from other situations. They are not mutually exclusive. But it is important that you start from home. You start from what is yours or what is supposed to be yours. And my point of emphasis is there are these value systems in Africa, in our societies, that are very critical, that are very important, that are very useful. We should not ignore them. But this does not mean that they provide every solution we want to every problem. It only means this is something of our own we can build on, even by learning from others or elsewhere. But to wait for solutions from outside and hope that they will be applied to our situation and give us everything we need is false. It needs a combination of approaches and a mix of all these efforts and lessons learned from within and from outside. So the emphasis is really about that. And in fact, in our case, again, if you look at our Constitution, and as I was saying, we've, in many cases, stepped out of what is known as conventional and done some of the things that maybe people would have said, why are you doing that? For example, when we talked about Gacaca courts, of course, people would have expected, and in fact, we were criticized, and people are saying, no, this does not meet international standards. What international standards have actually do we know of that have been applied to situations similar to our own? In the genocide, we had perpetrators that could go into millions of people Because to lose 1 million people in 90 days is not something that was done by just a few hundreds of other people. It was actually something that involved millions of other people. So to ensure that you bring back stability to our country in terms of reconciliation, but also have justice seen to be done, you couldn't apply the normal justice structures to deal with that situation. That's how we called upon this gacaca practice that is well known in our society, to make sure that justice is seen to be done, but at the same time reconciliation takes place. So gacaca courts were provided for. And then later on, if you look at how, people who live in Rwanda, in our constitution, the Rwandese Patriotic Front, my political party, won the elections. But the constitution which we crafted, we put in place because of our specific situation and history and circumstances, provides that the winner, the political party that has won election, does not take everything, like maybe happens in other places that we know. In fact, the constitution mandates us to say, yes, the president will come from that political party that has won elections, but the Speaker of Parliament must come from the minority parties. Or that the political party that has won elections cannot have more than 50% of cabinet ministers. The other 50% goes to the other smaller parties. You see what I mean? So our principle is the winner doesn't take all. This is something we put in place that people would question if they wanted. But for us, we put that in place because we knew which question we were dealing with, something that touches every aspect of our lives. There are many. There are dozens of them. I could go on for a long time. So we did things, learning from others. We looked at what the universal standards are, but we tailored all that to our own circumstances and situations and addressed Rwanda-specific problems.
Mr. President, I'm sure many people were interested to hear that this is your first time in Lagos. Perhaps this message should be taken to some parts of Nigeria further north, around the middle. Winner should not take all. But you mentioned the African humanity and the principles that you use to develop the institutions. I have a question here from Dan Lami Basharu, who's a club member and a former member of the executive. And his question is, Your Excellency, we understand that Rwanda has some very positive policies towards the advancement of persons with disabilities, leading to the enactment of a national disability legislation in your country. Can you please tell us a little bit more about this and give us advice on how your insights can benefit Nigeria as far as dealing with disability and people who have all sorts of disadvantages?
Well, really, some of the things we do are not entirely new things. There are things that many other people know that are important. Maybe the only difference is that because of our own situations and pressures and everything, we go ahead and do what we know we need to do and have promised ourselves to do. And there lies the difference. In my experience, I have seen countries, different places, people they really know what the problem is, they even know what the answers are, they have good policies, they have, they are as good as anyone else. The difference lies in whether we implement some of the things that need to be implemented for results that we want. For us, we are hard-pressed to get results. You know, Rwanda, even if it may be praised for many things, we also act on the basis of pressures. We had a small country, overpopulated, it's a poor country trying to develop. So these circumstances form a lot of pressures on us, and we want to see every time how we get out of this. So that is, if you will, a silver lining on the problem we face. So on the question of people with disabilities, we start from the fact that is well known, as the saying goes, that disabilities do not mean inabilities. Secondly, we also want to empathize and feel with those people who have these disabilities and recognize their rights to live and live a dignified life. And so we give them their time, their space, and their place in terms of consideration as to what they need or what they can even do for themselves, and avail that, and actually engage them and make sure that they participate in policy formulation that considers their specific context and circumstances. This is the starting point. If you start from here, everything else is easy. Yes, you involve them, you connect with them, you engage them, you allow them to tell you what they think about their situation, and you also add your own, and therefore involve national resources to make sure that that particular problem is addressed. This is how we did it. And through different institutions, like they are represented in Parliament, they have different organizations they belong to that generate ideas and integrate them in our national programs.
In other words, beyond lip service to delivering policies that give performance. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask you, if you have a few questions, to please raise your hands. As I said earlier on, His Excellency is prepared to take about 3 questions. And so I'll just basically divide the room into 3, and we'll go from there. Please, when the microphone is given to you, kindly identify yourself and your affiliation, and keep your questions very brief.